I want to welcome everyone present here this afternoon. We really do appreciate that you have made the choice to share your valuable time with us today. Most of our participants are from Trinidad and Tobago, but we also have some representation from Barbados, from the United States, from Canada, and from the UK. So we extend welcome to all. We just have a couple of rules of engagement so that we can get through this without any distractions. Please mute all the microphones during the conversations. Remember not to press the green screen share button. Please make your notes, questions, comments, and feedback and pull them for the Q&A session at the end. And during that session, we can use the raise hand function on your dashboard. Or you can send questions through the chat and our facilitators will pick up the questions and we'll try to answer them. After the conversation, we will send you a summary of the session and a request to do a short poll so that you can help us improve our service to you. So good afternoon again, everyone. Before we get started, I suggest that we just take a couple moments of silence, really to get present in this moment. So if you're in the space where you can do this, just close your eyes a little bit and take a couple of deep breaths. Really just center yourself in this moment. And if you can, set an intention. My intention is to share valuable information with you so that you can use it to improve your life and your livelihood. And when you're ready, you can just open your eyes again. Thank you. So, I'm Bibi. Most people know me as Shanaz. I am the founder and CEO of CNETT, the Caribbean Network for Empowerment Through Training. This organization is really a culmination of decades of work and experiences in many diverse areas. And I really believe that we have come up with a pioneering business model that is relevant to the environment now. And when I say now, I really mean now, in the middle of the pandemic or as we are coming out of the pandemic, and when new systems and structures are required at this point in time. In so many ways, CNETT has been leaning into the future. It is a future that many have been discussing for a long time, and it's finally upon us. So I think we are poised and we are in a good position. Just a little background on me before we go in. For those who know me, you know, I am a perpetual student. I love learning. I have a lot of certifications and I have a lot of work experience, but I too know the pain and trauma of being unemployed and seemingly unemployable. And I say that because I think that's what's happening now. The United Nations has said that more than 50% of persons will be unemployed or more at the end of this pandemic and as we move out of the pandemic. And quite a bit of micro businesses will be they will not be functional again. So it is a really harsh reality to face, especially when there was no opportunity, and I'm talking personally and what's going on, there was no opportunity to prepare for it or when it goes on for a long time. And this actually is what happened to me. And I believed that over time that I became an entrepreneur because I needed to become an entrepreneur. And I've recently figured out that that's not so, but that's another conversation we could have about entrepreneurship. But for this conversation, when I had this business idea, there wasn't the right support system around me for someone like me who had a good idea, possibly novel, and needed a different set of resources and guidance to create this business. It was really difficult, but we recognize that when you stick to it, when you are diligent behind it, there is some kind of magic that happens, and people in support comes from it comes from unexpected places. So after a lot of hard work, CNETT was a bona fide startup as a micro business. So what do? We actually provide the same kind of support that I wanted when I was starting up. We are providing that support for micro and small business startups. Our work is really focused on the actualization of the Sustainable Development Goals, and Lyndon can post the link to the SDGs in the chat box. And we have focused our work on SDG 8, which promotes decent work for all. And in the CNETT portfolio, it really integrates all, we have found a way to integrate all the rest of the SDGs into that SDG 8. We started out in the area of food and agriculture. SDG 8 is decent work for all. We started off in the food and agriculture area, and this remains a key focus area for CNETT. Our vision has always been an empowered society where we all have the opportunity and support to realize our potential to make a positive impact. The mission of CNETT remains to create conscious businesses, leaders, and lifestyles, and we do this through proficient technical vocational training, apprenticeship, and mentorship focused on empowerment, personal empowerment, employment, and entrepreneurship. We live by our code. We recognize that we are change agents. We operate with integrity and professionalism. We take our responsibilities seriously. We are completely respectful of all things, and we are always appreciative and filled with gratitude. And we try to have fun along the way. And our philosophy is transform yourself, transform the world. Our business model is community-based, and that's real. It means that every member of our group is recognized and supported for the value they bring to this unit. And that's where we come into today's session. To support the MSCs at this point in time, as we were in the pandemic, we created a program called Corporate First Responders Program. And the intention was for the big brother and sister organizations in Trinidad and Tobago to lend a helping hand to our micro and small business community who was struggling. I extended this request for support to our local organizations. And interestingly, there were only a couple of individuals who stepped up to support. None of our corporate entities stepped up, and I'll put a little pin there. This morning, NETCO connected with us. Just a little while ago, NETCO connected with us, and we have a meeting with NETCO on Friday. So when we did not get that response locally, we went global, and I am very, very happy to say that we got a much better reception. So our program is now our global corporate first responders program. So this leads me into today's session as the country representative for Humanities team. It really is my great pleasure to welcome the co-founder and worldwide executive director of Humanities team to our CNETT conversations. So welcome, Steve. Okay.
Okay, and thank you, and good to be with you all.
So Steve, is this your first foray into the Caribbean region? Have you spoken to a Caribbean audience before?
First of all, I'm familiar with your work, which I love the work that you're doing, this focus on conscious business, which is very close to my heart, as we'll discuss. And I've certainly been out there to the islands a number of times. I have not been to the two particular islands that you're on, Vibi, but St. Lucia was the most recently the island I visited. And it's gorgeous out there. You all are blessed, huh?
Yeah, certainly. Have you done any conscious business work in the Caribbean at all, or is this the first attempt for us to do this?
I have not done conscious business work in the Caribbean, but by the way, I was born in Hawaii, which is off of another ocean, but there's some similarity because the Hawaii, is very much of the aloha spirit. And I feel, that's part of my bloodline is the aloha spirit. It's a beautiful expression of oneness. And you all have likewise, similar beautiful indigenous and other spiritual expressions of oneness there in the Caribbean. So I feel a certain kinship with you that way.
I like that, the aloha spirit. So in preparation for this meeting, Steve, I read that before you co-founded Humanities Team with best-selling author Neil Donald Walsh, you also co-founded and led two high-growth technology companies based in Silicon Valley in the 1990s. And these companies spanned across the United States and Europe, and you were operating at more than 75 million in revenue. And you were also an officer in the Young Entrepreneurs Organization and the Young Presidents Organization. As you're aware, our audience today includes quite a few business owners, and I believe that many of them are dealing with the fear and anxiety brought about by this pandemic. So I'm curious, can you share a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur? Because we are very focused on the entrepreneurship and microbusiness aspect of it. While we may not be at your scale, I think the emotions may be similar. How did you transform your idea into an actual business? What are some of the highs and the lows that you had to endure? And what really helped you survive these difficult times?
So there's a lot there. Well, first, let me just share. In the 80s, I worked for IBM. I was in mainframe sales, and had good success in IBM. And that was the 1980s. Now, in 1992 is the year that they say the internet was born. It was kind of right in that time frame. And the companies that I started in the 90s, the first one was called ENS, Enterprise Networking Systems. And what we were doing is we were putting these products called switches and routers and bridges and things like that into mostly large enterprises to support their enterprise-wide data communication. Actually, voice and data were coming together at that time. And these technologies that we were selling were helping to connect like Levi Strauss and Esprit and the AAA companies as examples. Even Apple Computer we worked with helped to connect their enterprises all over the world using these technologies. So what we were doing is we were putting the technologies into their campus backbones and then tuning their networks, their voice and data networks, so they'd have just screaming high performance and high security, with the high performance. So that was when we started, the first business we started in January 1st, 1990, we were in very fertile soil, so to speak, because we were starting when there was this traumatic new industry being born. Now, but just to put this in context, I grew up probably like many of you. I had a single mom. I had 6 brothers and sisters. I put myself through college. I even paid for my own braces when I was in the 6th grade. So my parents didn't have any money. And so when I started this first business, we had used furniture and we were in a little executive suite for 2 people. It was a very modest little thing. But then we grew that business, as you mentioned, to 10 years later, it was a $75 million business, 175 people, and we sold it to NEC, which is based in Japan. Now, in that time frame, then we started a second company that was a consulting company called CNETT that didn't sell any products. It was just, we were selling engineering time on a fixed price basis. And it was in that same industry, in data communications. So it went through rapid, even faster growth. We started it in the late 90s. And by 2001, we had 75 million in revenue. And we were in Europe, we were in the United States, we were over in Japan meeting with partner organizations to put it in Japan. And then the whole tech wreck thing happened, which got that second business into trouble. But now, in terms of how I made those things work, so the good news to this group, because we're all conscious, that's the thing that's the common denominator here, is these were conscious businesses, especially the first one. In the second one, I brought in a CEO because I was tired and I didn't want to be the CEO. But in the first business, I was the CEO all the way through. And it was a very conscious business. We adopted, a local high school that was poor. We did Habitat for Humanity projects. And we did something called open book management, where you share your financial statements, even your salaries, with everybody, the whole team, and you create bonuses that the whole team can ride on. So, it's very conscious practices. And conscious practices are just they're elixir to businesses. Employees want to work for you, customers love you, the vendor food chain loves you, because when we're conscious, we don't do the normal Western thing where, like with vendors, you treat vendors like crap, right, in the Western world. But if you're conscious, you don't treat anybody like crap. You're honest, you're open, you're building win-win relationships, partnerships. So we were doing this with our whole eco community, and that was how we could grow in the 1990s from 2 people with used furniture and an executive suite to 10 years later, we had a huge headquarters building, 175 people. The other thing that was amazing about it, which again speaks to the power of a conscious business model, is we were based in Silicon Valley. So the salespeople that we were hiring, Apple Computer was hiring those same kinds of people. The Gap was hiring the same kinds of people. IBM was hiring the same kinds of people. So we were competing, for the top talent, the top salespeople, the top engineers, because that's how you grow big. If you're working with the big organizations, in these enterprise scale accounts, you need really good people. But really good people can go wherever they want, and they'll be very highly paid. But if you create a conscious culture where you're really treating them well, you're honest with them, you're open with them, you're sharing salaries, you're sharing your finances, you're sharing your cash flow, and where you're working in good faith with your customer base and with vendors and so on, everybody wants to work for you. Customers love you. That's how we grew so fast. And then we took that same model into the second company called CNETT. And again, the mistake I made is I was 10 years into it. I'd worked very hard, and I just didn't have the energy to want to be the CEO. So I was the operating chairman. So I was in the office. We shared an office, me and the CEO that we recruited in, and the CEO was not conscious. So he was there for the money, and that's a disaster. Whenever you, I think you all know this, whenever you hire anybody that's there for the money, it's a huge disaster. You'll never go anywhere. So we grew rapidly for a couple of years, and then it didn't work. So as for the highs and lows, the highs were many. One is I went through a lot of personal growth. As I mentioned, I grew up in a household with a single mom. And then I, over that period of 12 years, I was hiring very senior people. The number 3 guy out of EDS was my CEO for the second company. I was hiring CFOs. I was hiring vice presidents of sales, vice presidents of engineering. So I grew up, in a very humble way. And I had to go through enormous personal growth to just learn how to hire and lead, an organization with those kinds of people. And so it was a really, which of course is why all of you all are entrepreneurs. It's one of the wonderful things about being an entrepreneur is we grow, we really stretch and grow. And we realize capacities and potential that we hadn't felt, earlier in our career. It's a hugely empowering thing to be an entrepreneur. As well, like helping the local high school there, the South San Francisco High School, all the ways that we helped them. Their teachers were being rated for some of the richer school districts. And we were helping their school to have a strong IT infrastructure and backbone and things that probably contributed to helping that high school stay more vibrant than it would have been without our help. Um, and the kinds of people I hired, who some of them are still friends today. I just this last, was it yesterday or when was, I'm trying to think. Today's Tuesday, but in the last couple of days, one of my sales directors was just reaching out to me. And keep in mind, I've been now with Humanities team for 17 years, a long time. And this woman was a director of sales, very talented woman. And she was calling in and saying, Steve, I'm, I was an atheist. And now I'm getting close to the divine. I'm really discovering something new in myself. And in fact, I'm going to change careers and I'm looking to go now into more of a service direction. And do you have any advice to give me? And Denise, her name's Denise Cranny. She now lives in Austin, Texas. I'm in Boulder, Colorado. And it was I loved Denise back in the day because she was just a good-hearted woman. It's fun that I got to build something like that with people like that, but I'm staying in touch with these people. As far as the lows, if you know my story, I left, I lived the American dream. I mean, I got to, back in that day, I'd fly on the private jets. I go to the private ski resorts where Bill Gates' family has a home. You mentioned Young Presidents Organization, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, was in my chapter. There were 45 of us in that chapter. Gavin was one of the 45. There were others too. So I got to work with and spend leisure time with really, really bright people. I realized back then that the American dream, which is just a material dream, it's the Darwinian thing, right? Of just gathering treasure, more and more and more treasure. That wasn't bringing me happiness. And at the end of my life, I would be very unhappy with myself if I just dedicated myself to creating financial riches. So, and candidly, I made enough back then. When growing these companies, I made enough to not have to work for the rest of my life. I'm not paid now, I'm a volunteer. 17 years in for Humanities team, and there are many others. Bibi's a volunteer. Many of us are volunteers. And I realized that, I got in touch with my true self, which again, all of us are conscious here. So, right, that we're eternal beings, actually. We're spiritual beings inhabiting a body. And it's a very special, lifetime is a very special thing in terms of what are we going to give ourselves to? And is it just riches? And as entrepreneurs, and I'm still an entrepreneur. Now I'm a social entrepreneur, a spiritual entrepreneur, but I love creating things just like you all. But I don't like creating things only for money. I like creating things for, right now, my big, the thing that really excites me is creating this way of living on the earth that's conscious, where we're like, right, even in this moment, we were doing a little conscious exercise coming in of where we're really like present to this oneness, that we're an emanation of one. We call that one the divine in Humanities team, where we're deeply in touch with that, and where we're living in that kind of energy, with our coworkers and with my wife and with my kids. And now in this context of being a social entrepreneur, it excites me to create companies like the first one that I created, where you're creative and you're in an industry that's on fire, and you're hiring really cool, smart people, but they're conscious people, they're good-hearted people. They're not there just for the money. They're there to create something special with you. Um, so that's what makes me high, is I love that. Passionate people, devoted people, inspired people, bright people. I love working with people like that. And I get to, in BB and all of these other people all over the world that are part of Humanities Team, and uh, really super smart people that are creative. And so that I don't know if you know of our programs like Global Oneness Day now, that over 100,000 people join Global Oneness Day every year. And our programs, like we're doing one right now called Technology, Consciousness, and Evolution. It's about the blurring of man and machine, and because some youth are so excited about technology that they want to do, you may have read about Elon Musk has created a chip that he says in 1 year you can implant that chip in your brain. And so we've got 3 scientists teaching this program: Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Lynn McTaggart. And we're teaching in the program that you don't want to implant that chip in your brain, that we have these capacities and this potential in our humanness and you could even say in our divine, nature, that are superhuman already. We don't need to give ourselves away to technology. So that's what this Technology, Consciousness, and Evolution program is. And we have over 1,200 students in it right now. It's about 1,220 students all over the world going through that program. So, that excites me, where we're getting that kind of reach and impact, and we're in people's lives with these important messages of blurring of man and machine. What's important here? How can we live our lives, to fully maximize our potential as spiritual beings inhabiting a body? So let me stop there, because I don't want to go on, and hopefully I got to some of the things you wanted there, BB.
Steve, I think you gave us a lot of food for thought there, and there are so many nuggets in there that we could break out into so many conversations. The social entrepreneurship. It's the first time I'm hearing the concept of spiritual entrepreneurship. To me, what I got out of it is that also it took 10 years for fruition from your first company. So you really have to hold on to your dream and to work hard at it. I heard about networking and affiliates. There's so many core principles inside of what you just spoke about that, as I said, we could have a big conversation, but we have a limited time with you. So I'm going to ask you, you walked away from those companies. Oh, I wasn't aware that your companies were conscious businesses at the start of it. I was under the impression that you were running businesses and then you became a conscious person and then you went into Humanities Team. But it's interesting because to me, you recognized who you were and you recognized your mission is something Michael Beckwith talks about, and what really moved me. You recognized your mission and you created businesses around it. And normally in business, we talk about a business with a mission, and this flips it. And I think it's so powerful that you have a mission and you created your business. And can you tell us a little bit about that in Humanities Team?
Yeah, for sure. So in the Humanities Team context, so I sold those businesses in 2001, and then and Neil and I were friends because I got to know him in the 90s through the businesses that I was leading, because he'd reached out to me because we were a conscious business doing all these things, and he says, "Wow, cool, that these kinds of capacities are operating inside of a business." So that's how we came to know each other. And he'd asked me to do some things over, after I sold my businesses. He used to do a planning session with his staff once a year, and he asked me to come in and be the moderator, for that, to lead the planning session. So he then, as the founder, of his nonprofits, could play a larger role. You can't really play a big role as an idea generator and moderator both. Want to be one or the other. So he asked me to come in and moderate his planning sessions, which was a privilege to do, and worked with him in some other ways. And then in early 2003, he had this whole vision of starting Humanities Team. If you've read Tomorrow's God, you can read the whole conversation with God about the founding of Humanities Team. And so I went to a planning session to help him launch Humanities Team, and I was the one. There were about 20 of us there, and I was the one that really decided to do this with him, and I worked with him to launch it in June 2003 in Wilsonville, Oregon. He did the global launch, and I did the United States wide launch at that program. And then shortly thereafter, he asked me if I'd come in and to the role that I have now, to take this leadership role in Humanities Team. So the mission there, which is not so bleeding edge today, but in 2003, it was very bleeding edge. It was pretty scary, was that we were going to focus very narrow and deep on our oneness with God and each other and all of life. That was going to be the mission of Humanities Team. That there's no separation. That everything is an emanation or offspring of one thing, which you can call God or life or love or cosmos or universe or whatever you want. But, and I believed that was true, and I believed it was a worthy cause, and not in a small way. I mean, in a really big way, I believe that was true. So that was the mission, and I helped Neil launch it. Now, in 2003, I lost, like most of my friends, and even my family wondered about me, because that was a pretty bleeding edge idea, that there's no separation between God and ourselves. That might even sound very bleeding edge to many of you now, I don't know, but it's less bleeding edge today, because you've got scientists that have made this their life work, Bruce Lipton and Nassim Haramein and many others. But I felt like I felt that if we don't become conscious and really understand that we're spiritual beings, living in and that the earth itself is spiritual, that how would this planet ever survive? We use this term existential crisis. And I have 2 kids, both adopted at birth. But even if I didn't have kids, how can you, just from my vantage point, how can we occupy the earth and not play some kind of role in healing this existential crisis, that where we're just treating the earth as a refrigerator, and where we're all caught up in that Darwinian, survival of the fittest thing, bringing treasure back to ourselves. So I wanted to play a role in healing that, in healing this existential crisis. And I believe that the most substantial thing I could do was to participate in this whole educational process that first is creating the awareness, and second is creating the skills to live consciously, where we understand there's no separation. And in all the spheres of life. So including business, so conscious business, and certainly including that, where we've got a whole huge initiative just around conscious business, but in all the other spheres of life too. And so that's been the mission. And we have our Facebook page has grown very large over the years. It's now 676,000 is our worldwide page. And I believe that the pandemic right now is our greatest opportunity to really achieve a huge leap. This Gene Houston jump time, that's right now. It's right in this very moment is the Gene Houston jump time, because we've all come to stop, and there's this we're even forced to, even if we don't want to, and in this group we probably want to, but even if we don't want to be introspective and deeply consider things. And I think that that many of us are taking advantage of that and even going deeper into our own inner journey, which is creating a deeper and richer being state in this conscious journey that we're on. And for others that are brand new to it, where they're just going and getting in touch with their values, their deeply held values, getting in touch with the God of their understanding, getting in touch with their families because they're sequestered. And I think that's creating a really rich, jump time process.
We totally agree with you about the opportunities that the pandemic is creating for us at this point in time, right? I think a lot of us fully believe that we are in a holding vessel right now. The consciousness is in a holding vessel and we need to move it forward in the right direction. So there really is the opportunity for conscious leadership in business. Can you guide us then in a group like ours? I think we are now planting the seeds of consciousness, and I think this CNETT is the vessel through which it can get done. What role do you see for us as conscious leaders in the business sector? How do we attract persons? A lot of people will be skeptical that you can have a profitable business if you're a conscious business, that it's not possible to be financially profitable if you embrace people and planet at the same time. So it's going to be a hard journey for us, perhaps, to try to get this concept to grow. That's why we have CNETT as the holding vessel. So we could cultivate this inside of us and gain the strength to go out. But what opportunities do you see for us as conscious leaders in business?
So a couple things. One is that we've got to get any notions that we can't create revenue growth and profit, out of our heads when we're doing this conscious work. We can, we're not going to price gouge, of course, but when I was in the for-profit in Silicon Valley and here in Humanities Team, we created just a very fair price point for our products and services. And we can just stand strong in that. We don't need to give everything away and not create the financial well-being for our staff and our work. We can. So we first of all, we've got to be grounded in that, and have a conversation. If anybody ever feels like we're charging too much, I'd relish having a conversation with a person about that. And just sharing, of why we charge the prices we do and what we're doing with that revenue and so on. There's so much more I could say on this one, including that I don't think you need to have sales targets. I did in Silicon Valley, but I don't anymore. Now, our team is so passionate and so devoted. I don't need any sales targets. They're just unbelievably passionate. And even right now, I'm here with you, and they're all working on all these things. And if you could sit in a room and watch them, they're just going 1,000 miles an hour because they love what they're doing. They know that they're having impact. They know that they're changing people's lives. And where we create a culture like that, it's incredible how much reach and impact we can get, and growth that'll come from that. Now the other thing is where I change subjects is we've got to get out of our minds any thoughts that any of us are not, good enough, or we're not, we're pushing back on the word leader at all, because we're all good enough. We all have incredible potential and capacities. We all do. Every single one of you do. And we've got to any notions that we're unworthy, that we're not good enough, that we're not smart enough. We've got to get those things out of our minds. There's no place for those things. That's part of what being a conscious leader is where we stay in, where we're living in this place of connection and we're devoted to the greater good. We're all powerful, omnipresence, omniscience, uh, omnipotence. These things can be ours where we're in service. I really believe that. And I've got my own program called Conscious Leadership and Humanities Team, and I talk about these things, how we can harness these powers and get incredible reach and impact because we're in service. We're not playing a kid's game. You know, we're in service to the greater good. And when we're in service to the greater good, the power of the whole universe comes behind us. So I want to, just both of these things are really important. Charging fair prices, really stepping into our leadership, all of us, and getting a good night's sleep and feeling confident, and each day just bringing the fullness of who we are to our work. And when I say being confident as a leader too, that's in a conscious context. So there's actually a great deal of humility where we're never pounding the table or taking advantage of our position or anything. Because when we're conscious, we want the best ideas to come to the top. And that's part of the culture we're building, is all of the people that we're working with, that they're bringing their best ideas in. And we're all listening, and we're not in our ego self, our little self. We're in our elevated self, where the only idea, we want the best ideas to always win. And we never have to be right, about anything. We want the best ideas that are going to advance this mission that we're here for to prevail. And people feel that from you, and they know that they trust you in that. And that's how then you bring out the best in people, because they trust you, that's the culture you're building in your organization.
Yeah, I do believe in this part of the world. I'm speaking personally and from my experiences, that leadership aspect is something we will have to overcome. A lot of us are accustomed being led. We don't have that confidence. I have not had that confidence for the better part of my life, that I'm good enough to lead. And I'm now developing that confidence. This program here, CNETT Conversations, is a challenge to me to be public with my knowledge and my wisdom and my skills and my vision for CNETT, for the people, for Trinidad and Tobago, for the world. My connection with Humanities Team is me stepping into that fear and facing my fear of being a leader. So I'm so grateful and happy that we have you and Humanities Team. You're actually walking this walk, and you can provide the guidance for us, the proper guidance to become conscious leaders. So I know you said you have a program developing conscious leaders. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be talking a lot about that and probably promoting it, so that a lot more of us could step up into that role. Be confident for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me say about that. So keep in mind, remember, I grew up as the middle kid in a 7-kid family, and the middle kids listen well, right? They're not the oldest one and the youngest one are the ones that hold court and telling everybody what to do. The middle ones are listening well. They're not the big talkers. So I went from that kind of home of just listening well to really all of the things that you're talking about, Bibi, of I can do this. I don't need to hire somebody in over me. My wife used to give me a hard time in Silicon Valley when I hired that CEO in over me in CNETT, my second company. We grew that one to over 750 people before we had to sell all of its assets. And part of, I was tired is the key reason, but a part of it was I didn't totally trust myself that I, growing up the way I did, had the capacities to lead a group of 750 people. I didn't trust myself totally. And then, but working next to him for several years and understanding how he thinks and how he led, I realized that I had capacities that were beyond his. And in fact, he was there for the money, which created another problem. But um, I think that all of us actually uh, overcome or are in this path of overcoming these doubts that we have about ourselves, where we think that we didn't go to Harvard, we didn't go to the best college, maybe we don't have a PhD, we don't have a master's degree, we weren't the number 3 guy at EDS, whatever. There are all these things, insecurities that we have. But what I found is if we just open ourselves and are willing to stretch and adopt these best practices, where we're creating these environments where the good people love, where you're honest with them and you're never telling them anything that's not true, and you're paying them, what they're worth. That we can actually step into the fullness of our own conscious leadership. We can realize that we can, whether we're with a janitor or the president of the country, when we're conscious, we're going to be the same way with both, right? So with a janitor, we're not feeling like we're bigger than them. They're a spirit person as we are. And the president of the United States, also, we don't get overly jazzed about that. They're also a spirit person. So we treat them actually both in a very similar way when we're conscious. So now because I know we're coming to the end of our time, on the Humanities Team website, there are 3 free programs first on conscious business. So if you go to humanitiesteam.org and then you pull down the free programs from the top, you'll see it says, be the inspiration, be the influence, be the leader is the name of my free programs. There are 3 of them. They're each 60 minutes. And just go through those, one of them, and see if there's something there for you. And all 3 if there is, because they each cover substantially different ground. Now, in those programs, I do talk about my conscious leadership program, which is $297. I don't need for any of you to go through that program, the conscious leadership program, unless you A, really want to, and B, you have the money to do that. But go through the free programs and get all of what you can get out of the free programs, because I share the story in much greater detail of how I went from that middle kid, to this place now where I'm still growing. We all are, we're always growing. But where I was able to take out some of these big inhibitors of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, some of the kinds of things that are the mental chatter that we experience, that where we have to silence that.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm pretty sure we will take you up on the offer of the pre-programs. It certainly will take us forward. In the chat, Lyndon will share the link to Humanities Team, and I know we're coming to an end. Can you tell us a little bit about the Conscious Business Declaration? And if you guys have questions, can you put it into the chat? If we don't get Steve to answer them, we will get back to you with them. At least we'll be able to record them. And Steve, can you tell us a little bit about the Conscious Business Declaration?
Yes, so if you go to consciousbusinessdeclaration.org, if you want to write that down, consciousbusinessdeclaration.org, you'll see the website. There were 4 NGOs that created the declaration: Humanities Team, the Club of Budapest, based out of Europe, the Goy Peace Foundation, based out of Japan, and the Fowler Center for Business as an agent of public benefit out of Case Western Reserve University. So the 4 of us. We spent over a year back in 2015 creating the Conscious Business Declaration. And what that's about is just, what we're sharing here now is that in order for us to heal this existential crisis, businesses need to be conscious. They need to create a culture that's conscious. And so when we looked around at B Corp and B Lab, I'm sure probably familiar with them, and also Conscious Capitalism, probably also familiar with them, is we could see really good things going on, but the interior process being conscious, where we understand that we're all one, where we're understanding that we're all deeply interconnected, and where we understand the whole inner journey aspect of, the interior work of where we're going within, and where our being state is influenced. All of those things were not in these other models. So we spent over a year, the four of us working together, to create that conscious business declaration. And if you go read it, if you like it, sign it. There are wonderful principles there for you all as conscious entrepreneurs, because where you adopt those principles and you build your business based on those principles, what I was saying about ENS, my first company, can be true for you as well. And maybe it already is, by the way. You all may already have like on fire conscious businesses, and congratulations, to all of you, that where it's really working that way, and you're getting the growth and the people, and it's all really working. Huge congratulations. And if any of that you're working on, the declaration brings a lot of clarity to the different elements of what that conscious business is and how it works. And I think you'll enjoy reading them as a minimum.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. I know our time is almost up. We have to leave in a couple of minutes. I really do want to thank you for the time shared with us today. Gave us a lot of food for thought. I want to thank you for officially opening the CNETT conversations. It is a big accomplishment for us, and I'm extending an open invitation to you to visit with us and to continue to work with us as we continue to promote the development of conscious businesses, conscious leaders, and conscious lifestyles. We will be leaning very, very heavily on you as our parent company. I consider you to be our guide in this, and Humanity's team to be our guide in this journey. Do you have any final words for us before you leave?
Yeah, just go be who you are, right? You all are offspring of the divine. That's who you are. It's who we all are, every one of us. And go be that in its fullness. Let's do that together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Steve. Again, we're at our end time, just 3 minutes. I want to warmly thank Steve on behalf of everybody from the Caribbean for venturing and foraying into our little part of the world. Our second conversation is scheduled for May 27th, where we will be delving a little bit deeper into the actual anatomy of a conscious business. I think Steve created the environment for it, the principles, the vision, and we're going to be funneling inside of it now. What is the anatomy? What are the different parts of it? Many of the participants have signed up for that conversation already, but if you haven't, please go to our landing page on cnet.org and sign up. And we ask you to bring one more person with you. Steve mentioned that we're no longer into competition. It is a cooperative organization that we're building. Competition is passé, it's gone. Bring one other like-minded person to our next meeting so we have the opportunity to grow this network. I'm adopting a style that another global organization is using. It's called Inhale, Exhale. So we consider this week our inhale, our first inhale together, where we come together and we breathe in the knowledge and the wisdom. For the next couple of days, you hold that breath and you really digest the information that's in you, texturize it. And before you come back to us, you exhale into the environment. Exhale what you've learned and put it into practice. So we're going through an iteration of inhales and exhales. So again, I want to thank you all. Thank you, Steve. We will send out a poll for feedback and suggestions. And until we see each other again, be safe. I want to thank the team for putting this together, Lyndon for helping us with the IT, Shireen for the graphics, Bella for helping us with our marketing program. This is a new adventure for us. Sati, Nizam, Nicole, all of us, the whole team, Michael. I'm asked Lyndon to unmute the microphone so we can all say hi and bye. to each other, right? So once again, thank you so much. Be safe.
Yeah, namaste, you all. Wonderful being with you.
Namaste. Thank you from London.
Namaste.
Godspeed to all of you.
One love from Jamaica.
Together we can. All right. One love back at you, Jamaica. I've been to your beautiful island too. Love it. Okay. Love
Bye
and
from
thanks to all
Barbados.
of you. Yeah. Yeah. Godspeed to all of us, huh?
Okay, then.
It's
Bye.
1 o'clock.